Vivo first partnered with Zeiss at the end of 2020, and their first Zeiss co-engineered smartphone was introduced with Vivo's X60 series devices at the start of 2021. The only issues with the flagship X60 Pro Plus was the fact that the phone lacked a high-resolution display, wireless charging, and an IP68 certification, all of which was addressed at the end of last year with the X70 Pro Plus. It's now 2022, and Vivo have finally released this, the Vivo X80 Pro, which is a direct successor to the X70 Pro Plus, despite dropping the word plus in its name. The X80 Pro has everything that made the X70 Pro Plus so great, and then takes things to the next level. We're talking a redefined camera system, an upgraded chipset, a slightly improved display, a bigger battery, and faster charging. This is TechNick, and this is my unboxing and review of the Vivo X80 Pro. The global version of the Vivo X80 Pro that I have with me here today only comes in one color variant, that being Cosmic Black, but it is a fluorite anti-glare glass, and it has tiny little micro textures on its back for a very nice smooth feel. Of course, in the box, as Vivo always do, they have included a premium vegan leather black case, and we do have that ceramic cloud window to fight off reflections. Inside the device, we have a 4700 mAh battery with 80 watt wide charging and 50 watt wireless charging. We have a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, large vapor chamber cooling system, enhanced LPDDR5 RAM, and UFS 3.1 storage. The front is protected by Scott's Sensation Up glass. We have an aluminum frame wrapping around and that anti-glare glass at the back. Not to mention, we also have an IP68 dust and water resistance certification. But the star of the show here is no doubt the back camera setup. We have a 48 megapixel IMX598 ultra-wide sensor, 50 megapixel ISOCELL GNV, which is a custom made GN1 sensor as its main camera, a portrait telephoto 12 megapixel IMX663 sensor, which actually has gimbal optical image stabilization, which is now shifted from the ultra-wide that we saw in its predecessor to the telephoto this time around. We also have a periscope telephoto, which can reach all the way up to 5 times optical zoom. Ultra-wide renders come out fantastic at native 48 megapixel. Binning down looks even better thanks to Zeiss filtering. We also have 50 megapixel main OVR with that GNV sensor, and we can bin it down to 12.5 megapixel. We have 12 megapixel telephoto stills here, 2 times optical, 5 times optical for 8 megapixel periscope, and the periscope can do 10 times hybrid, 30 times digital, and the max zoom that we have over here is 60 times, which I guess you can still kind of make out. We also have a macro mode here, which utilizes the ultra wide sensor, does a pretty decent job too, and we have portrait mode. So starting with the regular main sensor, 1x portrait mode here using the main camera, shifting to the 2 times portrait telephoto looks fantastic. And now we have this new Zeiss cinematic mode, which looks even better, and it can convert into video too for 2 times optical video recording with Zeiss cinematic portrait video. We can also tune into 1x if that's your cup of tea instead of zooming into 2x, and you can switch to the natural portrait video, not cinematic. It doesn't look as good as the cinematic portrait video modes, and I do still feel that the 2 times optical mode looks a hell of a lot better than when recording with the main sensor. We can also shoot 8K 30 FPS with the telephoto at 2 times optical zoom, which is pretty awesome since it has that gimbal at the back of that sensor. As you can see right over there, the telephoto at the top, known as the portrait telephoto lens. And we can shoot 4K 60 FPS 2 times optical zoomed super steady shots, as well as 4K 60 main and 4K 60 ultra wide videos over here, all with standard stabilization. However, for horizon leveling stabilization, we are capped at 30 FPS 1080p and ultra wide, and for ultra stabilization 1080p 60 FPS when using the main camera. Things are looking pretty sharp when it comes to video, especially with the fact that we can record with 8K 30 FPS 1x, and no doubt we can also shoot 4K 60 FPS buttery smooth with the main sensor, as well as 4K 60 FPS ultra wide. Now, if we shift over to nighttime video, it doesn't look the best when you're recording at 60 FPS, especially when you're doing 4K ultra wide at night. Dropping it down to 30 FPS brightens it up a little bit. You can see a tad bit more detail, still not perfect when it comes to the ultra wide. Switching over to the main sensor, not the best with 60 FPS, but dropping it down to 30 FPS really does brighten things up, shows quite a bit more detail over here. Looks pretty phenomenal if you ask me, but the most important thing here is that we actually have something called AI night video, and it is literally night and day in terms of detail, but light kind of tends to be blown out a bit. Even though it's a bit brighter and everything else is a bit more detailed, it just cannot really handle light that well. Now with night mode off and night mode on in the ultra wide taking photos, it's once again like night and day. Same thing with the main camera sensor over here, handles night photography extremely well, but when we move over to 2x zoom, we should be seeing the telephoto, but it sticks to the main camera whether you're using night mode on or off. Same thing can be said with 5x, should be optical with the periscope, once again sticking to the main camera. Periscope finally kicks in once we reach 10x zoom, night mode off or on, 30x sticks with the periscope whether you have night mode off or on, and 60x once again sticks to the periscope, but we still have a night mode option when using max zoom at 60x. Now just to show you how incredible the nighttime photography is, here's night mode off, here's night mode on in my studio, and while it looks like it's a daytime situation, have a look at this video over here, 4K 60, you can see how darn dark it is shooting at night. With night mode off, it already looks fantastic. Night mode on, absolutely unbelievable. Looks just like daytime. The camera sensors at the back are arguably the best thing about this phone, and on the right side of the device we have the power button. Above that, the volume rocker. At the bottom we have a dual SIM 5G standby tray. Unfortunately, no expandable storage over here, though we do have a water resistant seal. We have USB 3.1 Type-C port at the bottom, and alongside that is the first dual stereo speaker. The second one is found within the earpiece over there, and at the top we do have an IR blaster, not really something you see on most phones, and it says professional photography at the top, which kind of ties into the selfie camera, which is a 32 megapixel f2.5 selfie snapper, unchanged from last year's X70 Pro Plus. But when it comes to selfie stills, things look absolutely phenomenal. Almost perfect edge detection, I would say. Not quite there with the best of the best. It does a more than decent job, but what about video?
Yo, what's up guys? Technic here, recording a 1080p at 30 FPS selfie video on the brand new Vivo X80 Pro. Unfortunately, it's capped at 1080p and at 30 FPS, but let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality when recording on Vivo's new flagship.
It's unfortunate that there is no 4K video when recording with the selfie camera, though we do have natural selfie portrait video as well as Zeiss cinematic portrait video. I'm not sure if Zeiss optics is included with the selfie camera, but it's still an option when you switch up the software. And using the portrait video modes at night looks okay. It defaults to 24 FPS, of course, and nighttime photos don't look too bad either, though with night mode on, kind of washes out the colors a lot and blurs things out a bit too much. And with the night photos using the portrait mode, looks the best with the flash on. The selfie camera is a bit of a mixed bag, but still takes more than decent snaps and videos. Unfortunately, no 4K video recording. However, we do have Qualcomm's massive 3D Sonic Max fingerprint sensor, which we saw in the Vivo X Note, which is only available in China. It's now here to the global markets with the Vivo X80 Pro. You can use 2-finger authentication if you'd like. The regular fingerprint area is absolutely massive. It takes just one tap to register and less than a tap, I guess you could say, to get into your phone. It is just so darn fast. You can use it when the screen is wet. It is so much quicker than previous generation under display fingerprint sensors in terms of ultrasonic tech, and it is a lot larger as well, making it really easy to get into your phone wherever you plug your finger down. We also have 2D face unlock. Unfortunately, no 3D face unlock over here. It just utilizes the selfie camera. However, it is extremely snappy. And when it comes down to the display, things are kept almost the same as last year, but just bumping up a slight. But we have a 6.78 inch E5 AMOLED 20:9 aspect ratio curved dot display. It has 1 billion colors, it is 10 bits, and has 1500 nits of peak brightness. Not to mention, it uses the same WQHD plus resolution as last year, and while the refresh rate at 120 Hz is unchanged, it is using LTPO 3.0 technology as opposed to its predecessor's LTPO 2.0 technology. Very similar over here, between 1 and 120 Hz, but this is apparently more energy efficient. We are running Funtouch OS 12, skinned over Android 12 here in the global market, and I must say it's not as bad as I thought it would be when coming from Origin OS in the Chinese market. It actually does a very good job of keeping things very Google centralized, very stock looking, with a few extra tweaks and turns here to aid to your customization needs. Things are nice and fluid, and snapping around the UI is very seamless. You have your widgets alongside your apps in your application drawer. Notification shader is pretty simplistic as well, and we do have 12 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM with an additional 4 that you can slap on with extended RAM, as well as the wonderful 4nm run Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU, which offers more performance and more power efficiency. And pairing that with the ultra game mode, and within that, the performance mode, hopping into AnTuTu, we have received a score of 1,009,266 points, which is just shy of the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphone on my channel. And when it comes to Geekbench version 5, just focusing on CPU, the single core and multi-core score was very identical to other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 run smartphones I've tested on my channel. And finally, when it comes to 3D Mark Wildlife, just stress testing the GPU over here, we got a score of 9,784 with an average FPS of 58.6, which puts it above the performance scores of the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones I've tested. But of course, this phone can do more than just run a couple benchmarks. Hopping into a game here, that being Genshin Impact, probably the most graphically demanding game you can run on a mobile platform. We're putting on performance mode and eagle eye view over here within the ultra game mode, and we also have something called frame rate interpolation, and this can give us a stable frame rate or a frame rate boost. Stable frame rate just keeps things running exactly the same, so it's going to drop it to 30, but it will keep it at 30 all the time. If you turn that off, we'll get back to our regular frame rate over here before we turn on frame rate boost. You can see things are sitting between 40, 50, 60 FPS. Turning on frame rate boost is supposed to increase the frame rate, but it keeps it around the same, if not a little bit lower. And hopping into Genshin Impact over here with the highest possible graphics settings and the max FPS, you got to bear in mind that this game is capped at 60 FPS, and we're sitting between 28 and 46, whereas the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phone I've tested on my channel sits between 34 and 58. It's pretty similar. I guess you could say it's a bit more stable than other phones that I've tested on my channel, but it doesn't quite reach the highs of other smartphones I've tested. You got to bear in mind this is more of a camera phone than a gaming phone. And hopping into Bullet Force over here, where the frames per second cap is unlimited and we can utilize the max 120 FPS, we unfortunately don't have the frame rate interpolation tool that we saw in Genshin Impact, since it's only for specific games, but we're reaching up to 120 FPS and reaching a low FPS of 92, which is not as consistent as other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones I've tested on my channel, but it still does a more than decent job, and it never really felt too hot in the hand, which is always a good thing. But what about the audio? Let's go ahead and give these speakers a listen. The Vivo X80 Pro is one of the most incredible phones I have ever tested. It has an extremely bright, color-rich LTPO 3.0 120Hz E5 AMOLED display, which is driven by a powerful Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset to produce a pixel-popping WQHD Plus resolution experience. It's Vivo's first globally released device to sport Qualcomm's massive 3D Sonic Max ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, which is miles better than any other fingerprint reader currently available, but there is unfortunately no 3D Face ID, and while selfie photos come out great, selfie videos are still capped at full HD resolution. Flip the phone around, however, and you are treated to arguably the best camera setup ever made. Each lens exceeds my expectations, whether you are taking snaps or recording videos, thanks to more than impressive hardware, Zeiss co-engineered lenses and software, Vivo's V1 Plus dedicated image processing chip, as well as the massive ceramic cloud window, which is there to fight off light noise and reflections. The design is elegant, which boasts micro-textured anti-glare glass for a smoother touch, and inside its gorgeous body sits a larger battery and faster charging, which leads me to say that I am more than happy to recommend the Vivo X80 Pro to any smartphone enthusiast out there looking for one of the best all-round flagships ever made.